Everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy A53 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2024. Now, the thing I will definitely tell you about this particular device is that the Samsung Galaxy A53, it was honestly it was a very interesting phone that came out back in 2022. And I still think there's a lot of capability behind this device. And I still think when I'm looking at this particular phone, it's a very, very good, decent phone. It was a, budget tier kind of phone, what Samsung was trying to make in 2022. So you have to remember that. And it's about 2 years old now. So let's go and see how this particular phone holds up. If you want to pick up this phone or maybe some other phones I recommend buying though, links will be down in the description. You can get that from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, the first thing I want to say is that when you kind of wrap your head around what Samsung's trying to do here, you can give a pass on a lot of different decisions that Samsung kind of made here. I don't think for the price of this phone that it's a bad phone. I do think that it's actually a very good, decent device that Samsung was trying to make for that particular price tag. Nowadays, I think this phone is a slightly different type of device, but at that time, that's kind of how I felt about it. Now, on the front of the Samsung Galaxy A53, you are basically getting this 6.5-inch Super AMOLED display. It's a 120Hz panel, and it's actually not that bad of a display. It's 800 nits, so it's not the brightest panel of all time, but it really isn't a terrible device, and it's not a bad panel at all. It actually looks and feels like a pretty decent display. Whenever I was kind of messing around with it, it kind of feels like a good, decent device. It's not terrible. I do like the fact that the speaker on the front of this particular phone kind of looks a little different. It doesn't blend in that well with the display. I actually do think that kind of gives it a little bit of a nice touch for the most part. The display itself looks nice. Again, I love having a 120Hz display, and for a cheaper mid-tier phone like this one was, I actually do appreciate that a lot about this particular phone. So, and that right there is one of my favorite things going on for this particular device. Now, this apparently has a plastic frame around it, and it actually feels fairly decent. It doesn't feel like that cheap of a phone for the most part. The back definitely feels a little bit cheaper, but this one does not feel that cheap at all, which I actually think is pretty impressive for this type of device. So that in and of itself is a very, very cool thing going on for this particular phone. On the bottom, you're getting a USB Type-C port, which is great. But you know what the other crazy thing going on for this particular phone? You are still maintaining that microSD card slot inside of this particular device, which that in and of itself, once again, is easily one of my most favorite things going on for this particular phone. I love having a microSD card slot, and this is in and of itself, again, one of my most favorite things going on for these particular devices. Being able to go through, just plugging and playing, expanding your storage if you need to, is a seriously cool thing, and I love having that type of capability on my Samsung Galaxy A53 as well. On the backside, you're getting this complete plastic back. So it's this frosted plastic back that was basically there, I think, as well as the Samsung Galaxy S21. So it's basically the same exact thing I think they threw inside of that phone as well. You're getting this quadruple camera setup kind of, which again is a nice touch. I like having that type of capability here. So that's another cool thing going on for this particular phone. And overall, I would say the outside build quality and everything looks pretty good. I like the fact that there's a lot of stuff going on for this phone, and it doesn't really feel super cheap for this type of phone for what you were getting at that time. So I do think that in and of itself deserves some credit for this particular device. Some things that this phone is missing out on that newer phones have though. You're not getting a super bright display. This phone's display is good enough, but it's not really as bright as you probably want it to be. You're getting IP certification, which is nice, but there's no wireless charging or reverse wireless charging on this phone. That in and of itself can be another really big, downgrade if you're getting this type of phone, but you're still getting a big size battery, which we'll talk about in a second. But overall, definitely gets a thumbs up for me. It's actually a pretty surprising phone for what you're getting here. Now, beyond that, from the camera perspective, this is one of those areas with these phones that just always kind of weirds me out. I don't know the best way to describe it, but when you look at the numbers and you look at the actual capability behind this camera, it gives you a different picture, and it shows you that numbers don't mean everything and specifications don't mean everything within a phone. So with the Galaxy A53, you're getting a 64 megapixel wide angle lens, 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, 5 megapixel macro lens, and then a 5 megapixel depth camera. Now, when you look at this particular lens, you probably would have thought that there was at least a telephoto lens on this particular phone, and that is not the case here. You're not even getting a telephoto lens on this particular device, which isn't really that bad, but it is kind of annoying because you look at all these cameras and you think it's going to be as good as the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra or something like that, and that is not really the case. But regardless, that's me just kind of, looking at random things. 32 megapixel front-facing camera, and I will tell you, it's not really even that bad of a camera setup. It's actually quite decent. You're not getting 4K at 60 on the front and the back, you're getting 4K at 30 on the front and the back, which in and of itself, again, can kind of be a little bit of an annoying thing for some people out there, including myself, but it gets the job done. I think that's the best way to describe this camera. There's still a few features built in, not as many as the Galaxy S24, but there's still quite a few things about this phone that I do actually like a lot. And I do think that in and of itself is another really cool thing going on for this particular device. So I think you're just going to have to kind of keep in mind about this particular phone from that particular perspective, and just kind of keep in mind that, okay, this phone is not supposed to be like the craziest, most expensive phone of that year. It's supposed to be a kind of like a cheaper budget phone for what you're getting, or a mid-tier phone at that time. And I do think that in and of itself is a nice thing going on for the Samsung Galaxy A53. So from the camera side, that kind of covers it up. Now from the software side of things, this phone I think is like done getting software support. It's kind of tough to tell. But as of right now, it did get Android 14, which is a very nice thing. I love that this phone got that in Android version. I will say though, it's still kind of like, not the best performing phone in this particular version of software as you may have expected, but it's not terrible either. And I do think that if you're going through and getting a certain device, it's definitely not that bad of a, performing device when it comes down to the software. Like I said before, it's still kind of supported, so you do have to give this phone some credit there. And I do think for the most part from that particular perspective too, things could definitely be worse, and it's not a terrible performing device. And I will say even from messing around with the software and going through different things like that, definitely not that bad of an experience either. So from that particular perspective, that kind of covers it up there too. Now, on top of that, I will say from the performance side, the performance of these A series of devices have never really been the best. Maybe on the more expensive ones like the A70s and those ones may give you overall better experience. These ones aren't really that bad either, but I have always felt like they were kind of missing out on a few things here and there. And with something like the Samsung Galaxy A53, with this particular device, you have to keep in mind that it's not that great either. It has the Exynos 1280 chipset inside with 4 or 6 or 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now the model I have is like the cheapest one you can buy, so it has like 4 gigabytes of RAM. And that's also the other thing, is that when you look at somebody who's using the A53 or A50, any of the A series devices, they can like spec out the RAM for a ton of different models. So somebody may be getting a really good experience on the A53, but it's probably going to be the top tier one. So if you're spending that much money on the most expensive A53, you might as well go buy like a Samsung Galaxy S22 or like a Samsung Galaxy S21 or something like that, and probably get a better experience from that device. So I look at the A53's performance. It's not terrible, but you're definitely going to be getting a better experience on some other devices when it kind of comes down to it. I do like the battery sizes of all these, Galaxy A phones. I feel like almost every single Galaxy A phone I look at, they all have like 5,000 mAh batteries. That's a very, very big size battery to have inside of a phone. Like the battery life of these devices is still very good. And that is, once again, one of my most favorite things going on for these particular devices. You can easily just go through and use this phone like every day, all day, and not really run into too many problems here either. So I will tell you when it kind of comes down to it, the Samsung Galaxy A53, I think is still worth it for some people out there. I think these phones were good, and I think they had a lot of capability. I just don't really think these are the phones I'd recommend every single person to buy anymore. I think there's a lot of other phones that I'd probably recommend people to buy rather than this one, including the Samsung Galaxy A21 and including the Samsung Galaxy A22, the Google Pixel 6, Pixel 7, or Pixel 8. Those devices are probably better than this particular one if I'm being honest, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to go and buy this phone anymore because there's so many other better options out there. If you still own this phone though, I don't think it's terrible, but I do think there's better options out there like the ones I listed, and those ones might make a lot more sense for me to recommend to people than this particular phone. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.